On today's show, most people have been down on the Heat's offseason, but are they ignoring the reasons to be optimistic? We talk about that and more with a new guest on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, Monday to Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with Alex Solana. You know him from the pre- and post-game show on Miami Heat Radio. You know him as the executive producer for the Hotch and Crowder show on WQAM. We're going to talk all things Heat today. We're going to start with a segment I'm calling Half Empty, Half Full, where we present the optimistic and the pessimistic sides of the offseason. Before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more this summer. FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I am going to ask you about the Heat's over-under on FanDuel a little bit later on in the show. But half empty, half full. Very simple. The Heat didn't make any real moves this offseason, but at the same time, they weren't forced to trade Jimmy Butler. Everybody is coming back healthy. Bam Adebayo looks great for Team USA in the Olympics. They did lose Caleb Martin, but the rookies look great in Vegas. Meanwhile, have to acknowledge the rest of the East did get better. 76ers getting Paul George, the Knicks adding Mikal Bridges, the Celtics come back complete after their championship run. Safe to say other teams in the East got better, but we can kind of take both sides of this. Do you want to take the half empty or the half full argument to the Heat's offseason?
So I think it's easy to take the half empty argument because I feel like the majority of the fan base is taking that approach. So I'm willing to take on the half full approach of this Heat season. And maybe you can call me biased. Maybe you can call me optimistic. Maybe you can call me, somebody who's getting paid by the team. So I'm just a shill for the organization. And that's fine. Go ahead, do whatever you want. But I'm looking at a team last year who, when they traded for Terry Rozier, and you can argue whether or not that was a wise trade, whether they should have given up the first-round draft pick to go get a player who may or may not fit their system to the best of what it is they're trying to run here in Miami. And that's fine. You could have that argument, but I don't want to have it right now. The reality is they traded for Terry Rozier. And when you look at what they put together, which was Terry, Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam, those four players together, that is who they were hoping on, banking on, carrying them to another deep playoff run. And the reality is, Wes, as you know, and as everybody knows, did we even see those guys? It feels like we didn't, right? Terry was here, Tyler was out, Jimmy missed time, then Bam missed some games due to fatigue, then Tyler came back, Terry got hurt, then Terry was finally back after the All-Star break, Jimmy had to miss some games, then Tyler finally came back, and then Terry Rozier, we didn't end up seeing him for the entire postseason or the short-lived postseason. So we never really got to see those guys. And after a full summer of Terry being here in South Florida, going through training camp with the Miami Heat, going through an offseason with the Miami Heat's offseason program, I like to imagine that he'd be a better fit within this Heat offense specifically. I know how much Coach Spo talks about his ability on the defensive end, even though some people have their questions about it. But the reality is they brought him here to go score the mother effing basketball, right? Go be a playmaker and go run this Heat offense. And I'd like to see how he'll look after a full offseason with the Heat, kind of framing his game to be better tailored to play within the structure of what it is they're trying to do. Do I have my questions about Jimmy being healthy? Absolutely. But I still think, as we saw in the second Team USA game, Bam Adebayo, he can still improve facets of his game. And I like the idea of Jimmy Butler betting on himself in what essentially is a contract year. Mm-hmm. Also, maybe trying to prove to Pat Riley and some of the people out there who are saying that he's washed and he's never going to be the same guy. We saw just 16 months ago, by the way, right? Like, it's not like this is Jimmy from 2020 we're all hoping is going to come back. We literally saw him do this last June. So 13 months ago. I like that group right there being able to figure it out. Wes, am I picking this Heat team to go win the NBA Finals right now in August of 2024? No, I would be an idiot to do so. But I see a lot of people saying their ceiling is a 7 seed, a play-in seed again. And again, a lot of things have to fall into place properly. And I know that's asking a lot, especially given the track record of health with this group specifically.
Right.
But a lot of that, I think you can chalk up to them just being unlucky last year. Some of it, right? Tyler rolling his ankle early on in the season, Terry's neck issue at the end of the season. Jimmy, we know, is going to play 60 to 65 games. I don't expect that to change this year, but him rolling his ankle, hurting his knee in the play-in game, I think that was just unlucky. And if that doesn't happen, I feel like they win that game, and we're talking about a totally different type of offseason in terms of who they brought back and how the fan base feels moving forward. So again, not picking this team to go win the NBA title just yet, but I think their ceiling is higher than just a play-in tournament team. I truthfully do, given that we didn't really see this team compete together for a large enough sample size to just write them off.
So that all was awesome. There's a lot of content in there. I want to hit a couple of points that you got there.
I rambled. It's been a while. No, I haven't talked
perfect.
Heat in forever. So I
know we're in Dolphins training camp season. Yeah. Hotch and Crowder, you're literally on a show with a Dolphins player, so I get it. But the Terry Rozier part of that is such a great point, and it is the point that Andy Ellisberg was making with the local beat guys. Was hey, that was really our free agent acquisition. Now you can look at that and say, all right, we're trying to reframe the offseason, try to spin this baby. Kind of say, all right, no, this was actually our free agent acquisition, so be happy kind of thing. But there is some truth to that. He and Tyler Herro played only 187 minutes together last season. That's less than 4 basketball games together. They didn't play together last season, in other words. And so we need to see what that looks like. And I'll ask you a little bit more about the starting lineup and whether or not they should be a part of that, or one of them should come off the bench. But Eric Spoelstra is not going to know the answer to that question until he at least takes it for a spin for more than 187 minutes. So there's a huge part in that. And Terry Rozier, for what this is worth, all healthy. Neck braces off. He's playing basketball again, basketball activities, all these things after he wasn't available at the end of the season with that neck sprain. So there's that. The Jimmy Butler part is the biggest part of this to me, because you're right about the injury luck. This team is built to get hurt. I say it all the time, but they're not built to get that hurt, right? You know, like there's different degrees of being injured. They had the most injuries. They had the most games lost to injury by far than any other team that made the playoffs. They were with their games lost to injury was down there with the Memphis Grizzlies, who basically didn't have Ja Morant the entire year, with the Portland Trailblazers, whose players you never heard of were getting injured left and right. And these were teams that stunk all of last year, and the Heat somehow still made the playoffs as an 8 seed, but made the postseason, even though they had the injury resume of a team that should be picking in the top 5 of the draft. And so that in and of itself is an accomplishment, but then you add on the fact that, yeah, they're probably going to be a little bit more hurt, but as long as they're not that hurt, they only missed a top 4 seed, to your point, by 2 or 3 games last year.
Yeah.
We're not saying, hey, they got to get 10 games better in the Eastern Conference. Now, maybe they do to have to go get a number 1 seed, win a championship, whatever it is, but just to escape the play-in tournament, it's not a whole lot that's separating the haves and the have-nots. And in the Eastern Conference, it's very kind of stark. There's basically 8 playoff teams, and the rest of them are going to be in the lottery. It's just in what order do both of those kind of categories fall into? So, but the Jimmy Butler part, again, is I think the biggest point is he's going to play 60 to 65 games. You and I know that. Contract year Jimmy doesn't turn into 23-year-old Jimmy, right? It's just because he's in a contract year doesn't make him younger and healthier. But to me, my question isn't how many games he misses. To me, it's how many games is he actually engaged in when he's playing?
Right.
Because that was my biggest problem with Jimmy Butler is, yeah, he played 60 games last year. He was engaged for 30 of them, like really played like an all-NBA player, which he wants to get paid to be because he wants the contract extension. So now you do get contract year Jimmy Butler where, well, if you're going to play 65 games, you better play like Jimmy Butler for 60 of those 65 games, right? Everybody gets their off nights. We can write those off, dog days of the season, whatever. You better be that guy so that we're not asking Caleb Martin to be our leading scorer on some of these nights, so that we're not asking Haywood Highsmith to go in isolation like he had to do against the Celtics in the first round of the playoffs. Like, so we're not asking Tyler Herro to be the number one option on offense, which everybody knows he's not. He's a great player, super talented, not a number one option on offense, and that's fine, but we got to stop making him be that. Bam Adebayo, can he play off of a guy like he's playing off of guys in Team USA where he's able to get kick out three-pointers? He's the guy in the middle of the court all season having to kick out to other people for three-pointers, right? And engaged Jimmy Butler gets him to do that, and I do think if you get a more motivated Jimmy who's out there for the cash, I think you get that more often.
I'm so with you because how many times last year at the end of the first half, especially early on in the season when Jimmy was playing. By the way, I hope we don't see game 2 of the season Jimmy Butler taking a rest day as well, because that I understand the frustration with the fans where you see him at the Miami Open, but he's missing games and then he says he's sick. I understand the frustration. I don't get upset with Jimmy missing games per se, right? He's going to play 60, 65, as you said, but the way you frame it, how many games is he going to be engaged in? How many games last year is at the end of the first half, Jimmy Butler has 3 field goal attempts. He's been in the free throw line 2 to 3 times, but he has like 3 or 4 assists. So he's kind of playing facilitator. We know he's capable of undertaking that role, but the reality is this team, especially with the way the officials swallowed their whistles towards the end of the year, I kind of expect that to be similar coming back this year. I think it kind of balanced itself out in the playoffs again come postseason time. But I mean, you need somebody who's willing to take 13 to 14 shots per game, at least half of them in the paint. And way too many times last year did we see a first quarter Jimmy Butler who was willing to kind of just take the pull-up three-pointer, the spot-up three-pointer, and kind of just, I think the word I want to use is meander through the first half. And it's not like on the defensive end, he's kind of just letting his assignment go. And he's not giving effort, because I don't want to say that. It's not like he's out there just effing off, but let's be real. You can tell immediately when a game starts. Go watch those postseason games back in the last year's run, the 2022-23 run. Early on, you'd see a Jimmy Butler who was in there locked in, ready to go, ready to lead his team. And then go watch, some of the games last year in November and December when he was playing. And you're like, well, this is the Jimmy we're getting tonight. And I don't think the Miami Heat are good enough to have that type of Jimmy to get closer to where they need to be, which is from 46 wins to probably closer to around 50 to 52 wins. Another thing that did rub me the wrong way last year, don't declare you're back in New Orleans after that entire chaos and then not really live up to it after, right?
That would be my biggest concern, is how much of this is level of engagement, right? How much of this is, we're talking about being physically there and mentally there, but then he's telling Chris Haynes and every other national reporter on the face of the planet, hey, playoff Jimmy's coming, and then you just go out and score 13 points. And to me, it's like, okay, well, you made this huge announcement. You're a guy who wants to make these announcements, but you also typically back them up. Everything short of actually winning the championship. You've typically backed up all of your declarations, and then he failed to do that. And so part of me is like, all right, another year of wear and tear, another year into Jimmy Butler's career. It's one thing, like, like one day, and it's just going to happen, he's going to look for that switch that turns Jimmy Butler on, and that switch ain't going to be there anymore. And part of me wonders, was it there before? Now, I guess my argument for that, the half-full version against that would be, well, when he came out against Philadelphia in that first play-in game, he had 6 points, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, and an assist in his first 9 minutes. And he was going up for his 8th points when Kelly Oubre landed on his right knee. And he was sprinting out of the gate. And so that would be the thing of, well, he did turn it on in the play-in game when it really mattered. And then he finished that game, and then he just wasn't available after that. So I guess all of that is to say TBD, I suppose. But there's a lot of other questions for the Heat this season besides just what kind of level of Jimmy Butler we get. How much should Bam play with Kel'el Ware next season? What are some other swing factors for the season? We're going to talk about all of that next here on Locked On Heat. Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. And luckily this summer, they're not, because we get Team USA in the Olympics, Bam Adebayo being a part of that, and FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up the bets anytime that I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. And recently, they got up their over-unders for regular season wins, and they have the Miami Heat at 44.5 wins. Now, last year they were at 46.5 wins. They hit right the under at 46 wins. So even after all that stuff we talked about with the bad luck and the missing Jimmy Butler and all these things, they still have them at 44.5. Do you like the over or the under on that?
I like the over, but again, I just sold you on the half full version of the Heat. If this is going to be another situation where Jimmy gets hurt early, Tyler gets hurt early, Terry gets hurt, Bam gets hurt, and they're just unlucky again, I think by the time you get to February where the trade deadline is, this team might look a little bit different. And then those of you who bet the under of, you said 44 and a half?
44.5. Yep.
Right. Are probably going to be sitting pretty with your bet. If the Heat don't have injury issues early on, I think they're going to clear the 44.5. I expect them to be a better team than they were last year. And part of that is their first round draft pick, Kel'el Ware.
We're going to talk about him soon. You can place your bets on the over-under at FanDuel.com. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Miami Heat Talk every day, 5 days a week. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. So my co-host David Ramil and I have been doing this show for years. At this point, I pretty much know what his opinion is going to be on something before we even talk about it, which actually makes for great content. But especially when I'm wrong, it makes it for even better content. But that being said, I love getting new perspectives on some of the things that we've been talking about on this show. So I've got a bunch of questions that I want to ask you as a first-time Locked On Heat guest, and we're going to try to get through as many of these as we can here. But the big thing right now that people are talking about, and what you expertly hinted at, which is how people can tell you're a professional, where do you stand on playing Bam Adebayo with Kel'el Ware?
So a lot of people are saying right out the gate, Bam at the 4. Start Kel'el Ware, Bam at the 4. And I'm not against it. Obviously, we have to see how it's going to look in training camp, and I think Coach Spo is getting a really good look at Bam at the 4 right now for the most part, even though he dominated the 5 versus South Sudan, playing alongside Anthony Davis over in Paris for the Olympics. But this idea that people have where they're just like, Bam's a 4, he's not a true 5. I mean, name any other big in the NBA who's gone up against the best 5s in the game. Jokic, Joel Embiid, and has proven that he's one of the best defenders going up against them. So this idea people have where the Heat are too small, and there's some truth to that, Wes. Like, don't get me wrong. We all want to see the Heat have more depth at the center position, and I think that's why they went out and drafted Kel'el Ware. But I still think games on the line late in the season, or even early in the season, the Heat Coach Spo tends to like to go small. And that's Bam at the 5. Like, they like the flexibility of him being the primary screener and him being able to get to the rim, catch down low if he needs to, and go to work, or be the primary screener for a guy like Terry or a guy like Tyler or a guy like Jimmy to go and get their own shot, and then Bam can feast on the boards. So I still don't see, and I know I could be wrong, by the way. I'm not telling you I'm right, but I still don't see how Bam isn't a 5 in this NBA. Can he be a 4? Yes. If he betters his outside shooting, which you saw a little bit of it at the end of the season, and now we're seeing a little bit of it again in Paris. I would love to see him and Kel'el playing together, especially if you're going up against a team like Minnesota, if you're going up against some of the stronger teams down low who have a lot more length and a lot more height. I think that's going to be huge for this Heat team. But do I expect Bam to be a 4 this year? No, I don't see it. And everything that I've seen from Coach Spo over the years has proven to me that at the end of the game, he's going to go small. It's going to be Haywood at the 4. It's going to be maybe Jimmy at the 4. Like, he liked playing PJ at the 4, obviously. Jay Crowder at the 4. Like, that's what he always did. He might have started Miles Leonard, but guess what? Miles was out, right? Like, it was Bam towards the end of the game. I can even go back to the Amar Stoudemire years when they rebuilt that roster. Guess what? Stat might have started, but that wasn't who was finishing out games. And Luol Deng was playing the 4 to end those games also. Like, he's always proven to me that that's the way he likes to play, which is more positionless, which is what I continue to expect from Coach Spo.
It's the death lineup, right? It's the Draymond Green at center, but Bam Adebayo is bigger and I shouldn't say more versatile defensively because Draymond at his peak was insane. But yes, you basically have that same mode, and there have been teams searching for the new Draymond Green since Draymond kind of burst onto the scene in his third or fourth season, and the only team that ever found anything close to Draymond was the Miami Heat with Bam Adebayo, and we saw how important those lineups were to that Warriors run. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I think that at the end of the day, Spo's going to want to go with Bam at center to close these games. And probably my guess to open the season is to start games with Bam at the 5 and probably Nikola Jovic at the 4. I like every fan that says you got to start Bam and Kel'el Ware are the same people that was like, Nikola Jovic is the second coming. Like, he's awesome. It's like, well, now we're just going to throw him to the bench just because you want more. But I hear you. The size part is really important. And I do think that there is something to be said about over the course of an 82-game regular season, reducing that wear and tear on Bam by playing him with another big more often. I just don't think and you don't have to start that way. You can get to that lineup in the middle of the game, right? You can still play 10 to 15 minutes of Bam at the 4, even if you don't start games with Bam at the 4, right? And I think that's just something that Eric Spoelstra is going to have in his toolbox that he never really had. I can go back. We forget to open last season, he started Kevin Love with Bam Adebayo. Like, he's tried to play big. And like you said, he would start even games with Kelly Olynyk or Myers Leonard next to Bam Adebayo, but it was always Bam at the 5, even though Kevin Love and him were a little interchangeable, but Love and Bam just couldn't hold up defensively. It wasn't viable. He got away with it. He got away from it by like the third game this season. Can Ware, as a 20-year-old, be good enough defensively where it is viable to start? I think that's something that Eric Spoelstra is going to experiment with, and maybe by the end of the season, that's Miami's starting lineup. The one thing I would tell fans, though, is you do not start Bam with Ware for spacing reasons. It feels like the argument always starts with, well, Bam's shooting threes now, and Kel'el Ware shot a bunch of threes in Indiana, even though he didn't really make a lot of them. But we don't talk about that part. We just talk about the fact that he shot them. That's going to increase our. You know what's better for spacing? Anybody shooting other than a big man. Because even your best big men shoot like 35% from 3, right? Yeah. Like Nikola Jovic shot 40% from 3 last year. He's a better shooter than Kel'el Ware and a better shooter than Bam. No, the reason why you start 2 bigs is because you want that size. You want that baseline of height and size, and you want to protect the rim, and that's why you do it. That's why the Minnesota Timberwolves do it, and that's why every other team that wants to go big does it. It starts with defense. And I do think that there's an argument to be made that Miami should try to get better defensively than what they were last year. They were 5th in defensive rating. I think that was a little bit of a fluky fake number. I think there's room for them to be better, even elite defensively. I don't think that there's a way for them to be elite offensively. And so I would just be like, well, let's just pick one thing to be elite at. Maybe we can be an elite defense. If that's the reason why you start Ware with Bam, go for it. But we gotta take it for a test drive, right, before we buy the thing, and make that our day-to-day car.
Absolutely. And the idea that Kel'el Ware is just, like you said, right, he's going to just be this guy who's shooting threes. So let me get this straight. You want the center out there, the true center out there on offense to just stand at the 3-point line, right? Like that's where, to me, it doesn't make sense. Also, going back to what you said defensively about that perhaps being a fluky number, a lot of that has to do with offensive inefficiency as well, right? Where the less shots you make, the more you're playing in transition defensively. And I think if the Heat could find ways to improve their offense, and that's a big if they could, I think it'll only help their defensive efficiency numbers and make them stronger at that on that end, starting their defense in the half court rather than having to get back in transition, even though they've shown that they were really good at it. But you look at some of the other big lineups in the NBA, and they have Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, and then they have a freak and Anthony Edwards who can just do whatever he wants. It helps when you have those 2 big guys, one of them who's shown you is very consistent from deep, and then you just have somebody else who makes up for everything, right? Which is what we experienced with Dwayne Wade, which was, oh, fine, Jermaine O'Neal's out there, but it looks okay because Dwayne Wade is just that good.
Right.
The Heat don't have Anthony Edwards, unfortunately, and you're kind of banking on this pairing, and I know we'll get to the starting lineup in a second here, but I think it's going to be Terry and Tyler to start out the season. You're banking on them making a huge leap forward together, playing a very similar role. And if those guys can be able to maximize that, especially on the perimeter, then perhaps down the line. But to start the season, I just can't envision starting a true center in Kel'el Ware, or I shouldn't say true center, but a rookie center in Kel'el Ware when you have a sample size that has shown you it can work and has positive numbers, which is Bam Adebayo at the 5. And by the way, if Bam and Kel'el do start, right? Let's just say they were to start. That means you're kind of relying on who to come in and play backup center minutes, right? Because if those two are starting, I understand the rotation can work out in several different ways. Kel'el can go to the bench after 6 minutes. Bam can slide over to the 5 spot. And then you have your pick, whether it's Haywood, whether it's Nico, to come in at the 4. But I still envision, that might mean some Thomas Bryant minutes. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And
either
I don't
way,
know
to
how
your point,
comfortable
too,
with that.
if you're just starting there and then you're just getting into your stagger 6 minutes in, then you're not really seeing Bam and Ware together for a majority of that game. You're just sort of getting your stagger. That's why it works in Minnesota, is because the guy coming out is the 6th man of the year in Naz Reid, the guy coming in for one of Gobert or Karl Anthony Towns. And I don't know that the Heat have that guy. Jovic is 6'11", but he's more of like a perimeter oriented. He can't really play. He can't play the 5.
No,
like that's not exactly the same thing. So it's a great point. Real quick, we already did it a little bit. The only guy you didn't really talk about is who you would have at power forward. But your starting 5 would be Tyler Herro, Terry Rozier.
Well, Jimmy, but my starting 5 wouldn't be that.
Okay.
I would, in a perfect world, I would convince Tyler Herro he's better suited coming off the bench, only because I strongly believe that him and Terry kind of serve the same purpose. But that's not an indictment on Tyler Herro. I believe he's better suited off the bench. I think he could come in and run that second unit as he's proven he's capable of. But what I think is going to happen is that Tyler Herro and Terry Rozier are going to start. I think the Heat, going back to our very first segment, are kind of banking on these 4 guys, Tyler, Terry, Jimmy, and Bam, to really grow and gel together. And I think the best way to do that is to get them reps and get them minutes on the floor. And I expect that to be the starting lineup. But my starting lineup would be Terry Rozier, Duncan Robinson, Jimmy Butler, Nico, and then Bam Adebayo. And then, we could talk about who's the first guy off the bench after Tyler Herro. But I expect it to be Nico, Terry, Tyler, Jimmy, and Bam Adebayo. And then we'll see a healthy dose, hopefully, of a healthy Duncan Robinson. I know a lot of people threw a lot of slander at Josh Richardson last year. But I expect to see more Jay Rich this year, even more so than we did last year. I could be wrong about that again, but I think Coach Spo really likes what he brings, especially on the defensive end. And hopefully his 3-point shooting is a little bit better, but that's my starting 5 right now. Nico alongside Bam, I think he showed you enough towards the end of the season that he at least deserves a shot if healthy. Obviously Jimmy Butler, I think Terry Rozier is a no-brainer. And then, I just think Tyler Herro is going to get the benefit of the doubt at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I get yelled at all the time for just being like, look, Tyler's starting. Until he's not, right? Like, just we can think whatever we want. We could think that Duncan Robinson should start. I've toyed around with the idea of starting Haywood Highsmith at the 2 just to give them a little bit more perimeter defense. I love that idea of starting Herro or Rozier with Highsmith, Jimmy, Nico, and Bam. I kind of love that lineup. But every time that Eric Spoelstra's had a chance to bench Tyler Herro, he's continued to start Tyler Herro. So he's in charge, not us. So I agree with you, by the way. I think that's the starting 5. I think it's Rozier, Herro, Jimmy, Nico, and then Bam. But I do think that the real experimentation comes in the cream of the Oreo part of the game, the middle part of that game where Eric Spoelstra is going to be able to tinker around with some different things. One last thing really quick. Just give me a name. Which of the following players do you think has the best chance to make an impact next season? I'm just going to talk about the young guys. Keyshawn Johnson, Josh Christopher, Pelle Larsson. Sort of the big 3, I guess, of Las Vegas.
So I want to say Pelle Larsson, just because, first of all, the way he won the Summer League title, like every shot, it seemed, was just like he's taking an elbow to the face. Like I genuinely, I like him, but I just think we have too many guys that fill that similar role.
Right.
So outside of Kel'el Ware, it's probably Keyshawn Johnson, in my opinion. I thought Josh Christopher was great, and he deserves an opportunity to be on this team. But I think Keyshawn Johnson, to me, can be more serviceable for what the Heat are trying to do this year. And you can kind of just plug him in, and he can come in and just be somebody who is going to work his ass off on the defensive end, but also just push tempo, man. You're seeing Spo on the sideline telling you, get up the floor, get up the floor. And I think he serves that purpose a little bit better than some of the other guys.
He's ridiculous in transition. That guy plays. I made this comparison. He reminds me of Russell Westbrook in just the effort he's always giving
Yeah.
all the time.
He's at 100% always,
all the time.
Always.
He's just. Yeah. I told him to his face. I'm like, you don't take your finger off the turbo button. And he just laughed. He's like, exactly. So, I agree with you, and I also think a big part of this too is what you were hinting at there is these guys are on two ways. They're not going to be in the night-to-night rotation. They don't have a role. They don't. The clearest way for any of them to make an impact is, okay, how do you get minutes? And it's going to be basically because of injuries, right? It'll be injuries or nights off. And Keyshawn Johnson, because he's the most versatile, he could probably play 3 different positions for this team from the 2 to the 4. It just feels like the pathway to him actually just getting minutes, getting on the court is easier than a guy like Pella or a guy like Josh Christopher. So
I would love for it to be Pella, by the way. I would love for
Sure.
it because I genuinely I love to see him ball, but yeah, I'm with you. I think it's going to end up being Keyshawn.
We'll see them all at some point. We know that. I mean, Eric Spoelstra will make it. He'll make it happen.
For sure.
I do want to tell you a story about when Tyler Herro liked to tweet calling me an idiot and what I did about it. We're going to do that after this. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Heat. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. All right, we're calling this segment Judgment Zone. So I'm going to tell you a couple different stories here. I'm going to tell you how I responded. Well, I'm going to tell you how I responded in one of them, and I'm going to have you guess in the other one. And we've only talked a couple of times, a handful of times. We're at the arenas. We saw each other at the Miami Heat draft party. Had a great time there. Didn't sweat enough, I would say. But I think that'll make this segment interesting. So here's my Tyler Herro story. There was a point in the season, I don't really recall what exactly had happened, but somebody had called me an idiot on Twitter. That's not new. The new part was that Tyler Herro liked it. And when everybody's likes, I think Elon has since closed that off. You can't see what people like. Yeah. But when that was open, everybody was just sending that to me. Like, Tyler Herro thinks you're an idiot. Tyler Herro thinks you're an idiot. Tyler Herro thinks you're an idiot. And I was like, wow, I think Tyler Herro thinks I'm an idiot. Because it was a video. It was like a clip from this. Yeah. So my face was on it, and he knows who I am. So, I went into the locker room. I guess I will have you guess this. So he had a game that night or the next night, and I went into the locker room, and I'm thinking, all right, do I confront Tyler about this or not? Do I say sorry? So I had 3 options. I either confront him. I would say, like, hey, why are you liking things, calling me an idiot? Come on, like, what's going on here? I apologize right away. I'm like, hey, look, I was out of line of whatever I said. I didn't mean it. Are we good? Or the opposite version is just don't even mention it. Don't even mention it. Just go in the locker room, do your job, be part of the scrum, and just let it blow over. What do you think I did of those 3 options?
I would say you chose option 3. You kind of just let it blow over.
I thought that's what I was going to do. And I did a little bit of an in-between of I went up to him in the locker room, and I made sure that I got a one-on-one moment with him, and I just said, hey, man, you good? And he goes, yeah. I think he was injured at the time. Oh, yeah, that's right. He was coming back from this injury, and it was after Shams said something like, he isn't coming back anytime soon. And then I said something about the Shams report, and then I got called an idiot somehow. But yeah, I went up to him like, hey, you doing good? And he's kind of like, yeah, I'm doing all right. He looks up at me. We make eye contact, and I go, we're good. And he's like, we're good. And that was it. So I don't know that he fully knew what I was like referencing, but it was enough for me. So it was a little bit of a hedge of like, I didn't really just let it blow over. Like, I wanted to make sure he knew that I was around. I don't know. So that's how I handled it. How would you have handled it?
Yeah, I definitely. But I'm soft. I wouldn't have gone up to him and one-on-one. Like, I would have just let it blown over because I genuinely believe some of these guys are just scrolling Twitter and somebody sticks up for them. They like it. Like, they don't really go into the full context of what it is. I could be wrong, by the way. We know Tyler. He's got Twitter fingers. Like, he's on social media heavy. And he's a younger guy. Like, he comes from that crop of growing up with social media already. So I could be wrong, but my best guess is he doesn't actually think you're an idiot. He just liked the tweet calling somebody who's criticizing him an idiot because he liked the tweet. So right. I probably would have just let it blow over unless he @s you specifically and like directly goes at you, DMs you, which he's, allegedly been known to do, by the way. Yeah, I kind of would have just let it blown over, but I don't think you did anything wrong. Like, hey, are we good? You're in the locker room. That's something that I miss out on, having to do the damn post game. I'm sitting there just with the people cleaning up the Kaseya Center after games, like I miss out on that experience of going and actually developing, rapport with these players. So
Right.
you're in there, like you don't want Tyler Herro to hate you and not answer your questions. You got to go up to him and be like, hey, is everything okay? Are we good? Do we have to squash this right now?
He's one of my favorite players to talk to in that locker room. I love talking to Tyler Herro. So that's why I was a little like, oh no. I think you probably had the right idea. I think you nailed it. I think he was just scrolling, mindlessly liking stuff, and it wasn't a big deal. We were good ever since then. He answered my questions. We talked. It was fine. But I was just like totally in my head about it. And I was like, I gotta say something. I can't just say nothing. But that's probably just my problem. All right, last one here. So I'm in Las Vegas for Summer League.
Mm-hmm.
I usually go for work. I don't remember the last time I was in Vegas, not for work, but I usually go for work and I do not bring my wife. And I said, I'm just going for work, whatever. You don't want to be around me, whatever. But I said, you know what, let's try it. And I was like, do you want to go? And she's like, yeah, let's go. So we went and it was really interesting. It was a different side of Las Vegas than I usually see, right? Usually when I'm going for Summer League, I'm in the arena eating arena chicken tenders, arena hot dogs, arena coffee, Diet Cola, like all this stuff, right? She's like, no, we're not doing that. We're in Las Vegas. We're going to nice meals. We're going to casinos. We're going out. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So we went out. She made reservations to this restaurant called Catch in the Aria, which apparently they're opening up a version of that in South Beach. We went to this Mexican restaurant that I guess the Kansas City Chiefs celebrated their Super Bowl at. All these things, basically all these places that she found on TikTok. But while I'm there, I realized, Las Vegas Summer League doesn't happen at UNLV's campus. Las Vegas Summer League is happening all throughout Las Vegas. There are players up the wazoo, all over the strip, right? And so every time we're sitting at one restaurant, and I got Daryl Morey to my left, and I got Pascal Siakam to my right, and Byron Scott behind me, and I'm just like, what on earth? This is where everybody is. Nobody's. So my question to you is, do I tell my wife every player that walks by? Because you know this, like you will recognize these players as soon as they walk up, not just because they're all 6'8", but like you know their faces, you know who they are. Like it's just a murderer's row of boom, boom, boom. Am I pointing out every single one of them, or do I just let it go?
So it depends. I don't know if your wife is into sports. So my fiance doesn't know the first thing about sports other than like the Heat. She loves Jimmy Butler, she loves Jaime, and she loves Tyler Herro. Like those are her three favorite players. But one of the most popular stories I've ever told on the air was I used to travel with the Dolphins. I was their executive producer, and I would fly on the team plane with the Dolphins. So we would go to every city, land, team bus, team hotel, and go and have drinks. And I developed a relationship with Dan Marino, with Kim Bokamper, obviously Joe Rose, Jimmy Cephalo, Nat Moore, like some Dolphins legends. Obviously, Dan Marino being the most popular one, but Nat Moore as well. I saw these guys every weekend for 3 years. And we were in LA. The Dolphins 2 years ago played the Niners and the Chargers back-to-back on the road in California. So I flew her out. We were staying the whole week in LA. And one day, we were getting an Uber to go to In-N-Out Burger. And Dan Marino and Nat Moore are standing outside the team hotel. And we're waiting for an Uber, both of us at the exact same spot. And they're like, hey, Solana, like super casual, like, Solana, what's up? High five them. I introduce him to my fiance. This is Dan. This is Nat. Oh, cool. Where are you guys going? Stay out of trouble. Blah, 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 blah. We get in the Uber, and I'm thinking to myself, whew, like my fiance is about to go down on me right now, right? Like Dan Marino and Nat Moore just casually said, what's up to me? Like, get in the Uber, start driving. And like a minute passes and she's just like on her phone, nothing. Doesn't say it. And I go, do you know, like,
what just happened?
Do you know what just happened? Like, do you realize what just, and she's like, what? And I'm like, do you know who that was? She's like, oh yeah, that's Don Shula, right? And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. I wanted to jump out of the Uber there. So I say that to tell you, I wouldn't have told my wife or my fiance anything, because she just wouldn't have known. Like Byron Scott, she would have no idea who any of those people were. If she didn't know, grew up her entire life, born and raised in Miami, if she didn't know who Dan Marino was, she's not going to know who
Daryl Morey or Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, she just wouldn't. Yeah, so I could tell her,
great.
Hey, that's Pascal Siakam, really good player for the Indiana Pacers. And she'd be like, what are the Pacers? Like she's not a sports person at all.
That's a great story. So now you are just like, you know what? I'm just not going to point out anybody,
Yeah,
even if I'm
she
best
just
friends
doesn't
with them and
care.
have known him for years. Doesn't matter if you might be the greatest quarterback of all time. You clearly don't care. So I love that. So the answer to mine was, so my wife does know a little bit more about sports just because she's forced to watch them around me. She's a big soccer fan, Columbia. That's the whole thing. But in terms of like the NBA, had really no reference points for it other than like Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, whatever.
Right.
Since she's been with me, she's starting to learn more people, but she didn't know like these people that I'm talking about either. But she likes to know that she's in places where other important people are. So if I just tell her a name, and I could have just made him up, I could have just been like, that's Walrus Heffelumper, and she'll just been like, is he important? I'd be like, yep, best basketball player of all time, and she'll be like, that's awesome, and she'll just be happy knowing that she's in the same place as another famous person. So I did, just for her sake, point out everybody, and she'll just like every tall person that walked by, she'll be like, kind of elbow me, she's like, is that somebody? And I'd be like,
who is that?
And so it came kind of like a bingo card for me, because and it was literally, I'm like, oh, that's Chimeze Metu. He's like the backup forward for the Sacramento Kings, who I think just signed in like Spain or something. I don't even know. But so it came like a fun test for me to be like, all right, how many of these guys can I actually recognize? So that's how we approached it.
No, but that is a very good thing that you did there. Like, hey, you picked a good restaurant. Look
exactly.
Around.
Yeah.
By the way, my fiance is Colombian as well, so I'm in that same boat with you, brother. I love it.
Colombia, Argentina was not a fun day in this household.
Well, Colombia, Uruguay was a semifinal, and her father's still giving me a lot of flack about it. So tensions are high in the Solana household.
We celebrated that one. We did celebrate that one. Alex Solana, again, you guys know where to find him. Pre and post game show on Miami Heat Radio. Hotch and Crowder, executive producer on WQAM. Awesome guest. Thanks so much for jumping on, man. I really hope we could bring you on again soon. So thanks so much. I know you have the show to get to, but thanks so much. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.